They don't start their mornings with news, emails, or market charts. They start with ancient scrolls. Every morning, before touching a single dollar, the world's richest minds open text written thousands of years ago, the same words that guided kings, prophets, and conquerors. And here's the strange part. They don't read them for religion. They read them for strategy, because hidden inside these sacred writings are codes of discipline, patience, and abundance, the same principles that built empires and sustained fortunes long before Wall Street ever existed. The billionaires you admire may look modern, but their minds are ancient. And in the next few minutes, you'll understand why. Before there were billionaires, there were kings. And before there were financial advisors, there were prophets. Long before the word wealth was ever printed on a screen, men like Solomon were writing the laws that would silently rule every generation after them. These laws weren't stored in bank vaults, they were hidden in words. When the world was still ruled by swords and empires, Solomon ruled by wisdom. While others fought for land, he built a kingdom of understanding. And in those pages, the ancient Proverbs, lies the same blueprint that today's billionaires quietly follow. You think success is about luck or timing, but the ancients knew. Wealth is a pattern, and whoever decodes the pattern never falls again. Every morning, while the world scrolls through chaos, these few minds return to the source, to ancient writing that teach not how to get rich fast, but how to stay rich forever. They find in those verses the rhythm of creation itself, the discipline to sow before reaping, the silence before action, the reverence before ambition. Solomon wrote, "Through wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established." He didn't mean architecture. He meant legacy. Every decision you make today, every word you speak, every seed you plant, it's all construction. And billionaires, whether they admit it or live by that ancient architecture. Because the foundation of modern success isn't in technology or innovation, it's in order. And order was the first law ever spoken, even before gold, before business, before man himself. So when they read those texts each morning, they aren't reading for comfort. They're reading to remember the blueprint, the one humanity forgot when it started worshipping money instead of wisdom. They call it a routine, but for them, it's a ritual. While most people wake up chasing the day, billionaires begin by aligning with no noise, no rush, just silence and scripture. Before opening a laptop or checking a single message, they open something older than time, a text written by men who ruled without armies. Because they understand something that most people forgot. The mind that starts in chaos creates chaos, but the mind that starts in wisdom creates wealth. When Solomon said, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he," he wasn't describing philosophy, he was revealing physics. He knew that thoughts shape the invisible architect that money later fills. That's why these men and women guard their mornings like gold. They don't pray for wealth, they prepare for it. They read slowly, letting each word calibrate their focus. They study verses about discipline, patience, silence, because they know the world outside is designed to steal those things. It's not superstition, it's strategy. These texts, whether Proverb, Ecclesiastes, or the writings of ancient masters, contain the laws of rhythm, timing, and order. They remind them that the market rewards clarity, not noise, that power belongs to those who see before acting, who listen before speaking, who build before showing. And so, every morning, the few who understand this law sit before the same light that guided kings. While others chase news and notifications, they read lines that remind them of eternity. Because success doesn't begin with a to-do list, it begins with a state of mind. And those who master that state, before the world wakes up, win the day before it even starts. There's a reason billionaires are unshakable. It's not confidence, it's clarity. While most people drown in noise, they have trained their minds to hear only the signal. And that signal comes from silence. When Solomon wrote, "In all you're getting, get understanding," he was describing the law that rules both heaven and market. You can only multiply what you understand. That's why most people never grow. They copy moves, but never master meaning. They chase numbers, but never principle. They act like kings, but think like servants. The ancients knew that wealth doesn't respond to effort alone. It responds to alignment. And alignment requires focus. Those texts, the same ones the world calls outdated, are, in truth, codes of attention. They train the mind to think in order, to act with rhythm, to separate the essential from the excess. That's what modern billionaires are doing when they read them every morning. They're not searching for verses, they're sharpening their vision. Because when your vision is clear, decisions feel divine. You see opportunities before others do. You sense timing before others react. You build what others can't even imagine. Focus is the modern expression of faith. It's believing so deeply in a vision that you no longer argue with distraction. And billionaires, knowingly or not, practice that faith daily. in boardrooms instead of temple, through investments instead of prayers. Solomon would have called it wisdom. We call it strategy. But the source is the same. Those who master this hidden law no longer chase wealth. They become the kind of mind that wealth chases. And that's the difference. Most people read to feel inspired. The wise read to remember who they are. Most people read the Bible looking for comfort. The wise read it looking for patterns. Because Solomon never wrote poetry, he wrote system. Each verse was a principle, a code hidden beneath rhythm and metaphor, a manual for those who could read beyond the words. When he said, "Diligent hands bring wealth," he wasn't preaching morality. He was describing a formula, one that still decides who rises and who collapses. For every miracle of prosperity, there was always a pattern: action aligned with wisdom, discipline wrapped in silence, and gratitude expressed through work. And those who learn to recognize that pattern can recreate it in any century. That's why billionaires are obsessed with these texts, because the same principles that built palaces can still build company. The same wisdom that guided Solomon's gold trade now guides markets, investments, and innovation. They understand something simple but eternal. God never stopped rewarding order. Every market crash, every fortune lost, every empire fallen, all trace back to the same law broken. Pride replaces gratitude, noise replaces silence, speed replaces wisdom, and when that happens, collapse follows. But those who keep returning to the ancient order, the rhythm written between the lines, rise again, quietly. They don't look for verses that promise wealth, they look for the ones that reveal structure, how to think, how to measure, how to multiply. The wisdom of Solomon was never about religion, it was about architecture of the soul, the inner design that creates outer prosperity, because wealth isn't a number. It's a structure of understanding, and if your foundation is built on noise, your gold will always vanish with the wind. That's why they read every morning, not to memorize words, but to realign with the law that governs both spirit and success, the law that whispers through every verse. Prosperity is not a reward, it's a reflection. There's a reason the richest kings gave more than anyone else, because they understood a mystery most people still resist. What you release, multiply. Solomon said, "One gives freely, yet grows richer. Another withholds and suffers want." It sounds poetic, but it's mathematics from heaven. In his kingdom, generosity wasn't charity, it was strategy. Gold didn't flow to who clutched it, but to those who moved it. Because money, like water, dies when it stands. Every time you give, you send a signal that you're not a prisoner of scarcity, and the universe responds not because it's mystical, it's logical. What you circulate expands, you hoard. The ancients didn't see wealth as possession, they saw it as a current, divine energy that passes through wise hands and blesses everything it touches. That's why Solomon's table was never empty. He knew that generosity built invisible bridges between people, opportunities, and even nations. Giving created movement, and movement created multiplication. But today, we've confused saving with withholding. We think keeping more means winning more, yet those who hold too tightly lose everything that breathes. The billionaires who understand this principle don't donate for image, they invest in flow. They know that when wealth stops circulating, decay begins. They give to keep life in motion, to let energy travel and return tenfold. Solomon would say, "When you open your hand, you open your future." That's why some of the most powerful people are also the quietest givers. They understand the law behind the law, that the act of giving is not subtraction, it's activation. And here's the truth. Every time you bless in secret, something shifts in the unseen. Every silent act of generosity plants a seed that grows in dimensions money can't reach. The richest souls know this, that abundance doesn't live in what you keep, but in what you're willing to let go. Generosity opens the door to wealth, but discipline keeps it from escaping. Solomon wrote, "Whoever gathers little by little will increase." It sounds simple, but it's the hardest law to live by, because humans love momentum, but hate maintenance. Many people lose what they prayed for, not because they were cursed, but because they never learned to sustain blessing. They confuse excitement, consistent abundance with indulgence. But Solomon knew, true prosperity doesn't roar, it repeats. He observed that gold grows the same way wisdom, quietly, through rhythm. Every habit becomes a brick, every day a wall, every choice a temple, and wealth, like faith, is built one faithful act at a time. Discipline is the invisible hand that keeps the palace standing after the applause fades. It's what separates kings from those who only dream of thrones. In his writings, Solomon compared impatience to a thief, a force that steals futures before they mature. That's why he warned, "Haste makes poverty. The wise don't chase speed, they trust the slow rhythm of mastery, because they know that slow is smooth and smooth becomes unstoppable. Even the most divine opportunity collapses without structure. Even miracles require management. That's what most people miss when they pray for prosperity. They expect heaven to multiply what they still mismanage on earth. The billionaires who rise and stay there don't have more luck. They have more rhythm. They repeat sacred patterns every day, like monks disguised in suits. They know that discipline isn't punishment, it's protection. It's the fence around the garden of abundance. And the moment you stop tending it, weeds return. Solomon understood that without discipline, even divine favor leaks. Gold without order becomes dust. Faith without schedule becomes noise. Wealth without boundaries becomes a storm that devours its owner. So he taught, guard your heart, for out of it flow the issues of life. Because discipline begins there. In the unseen decisions, no one applauds. It's not glamorous, it's not loud, but it's the sound of kings building empires that last longer than their names. And that's why true wealth isn't measured by how fast you win, but by how long it remains when no one is watching. Faith without structure collapses. Strategy without spirit corrodes. That's why Solomon lived between both worlds, kneeling before God, yet surrounded by gold. He knew that faith was never meant to replace wisdom. It was meant to energize it. Every prayer he made was followed by a plan. Every revelation by construction, because divine favor without direction is like wind without sails. He wrote, "The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, not miracles, not shortcut plans." And that's the secret billionaires rediscovered. They may not quote scripture, but they live by its laws, structure, rhythm, patience, and service. They understand that the universe rewards those who move in harmony with divine order. And divine order is not mystery, it's mathematics. Faith says believe, strategy says build, wisdom says do both. That's how palaces rise and companies endure. Solomon's brilliance wasn't that he prayed more than others, it's that he listened and executed. He didn't just expect blessing, he architected. His temple wasn't only a place of worship, it was an empire blueprint, symbolic, structural, eternal. Every stone represented an alignment between heaven and earth. When billionaires read ancient texts each morning, they're not looking for comfort, they're seeking calibration. They realign their thoughts with patterns that outlive economy, because markets change, but principles don't. Every day they ask the same silent question: how can I honor the law that governs both spirit and wealth? And that question is the bridge between praying and prosper. Faith is the oxygen, strategy is the vessel. One without the other is suffocation or drift. Solomon understood that wisdom was never passive. It demanded partnership, a collaboration between divine inspiration and disciplined execution. So when he wrote, "By wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established," he wasn't talking about architecture. He was revealing the map of abundance itself, the invisible union of faith and structure. That's why the wealth of the wise endures, because it's not built on impulse but on alignment. And that's what separates spiritual prosperity from spiritual fantasy, the willingness to turn revelation into repetition. Every empire that forgets reverence collapses, not from poverty, but from pride. Solomon knew it. That's why, after revealing all his secrets, wisdom, silence, discipline, generosity, and strategy, he ended with a whisper. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It wasn't fear like terror. It was recognition that all light, all gold, all brilliance begins from something higher. Reverence his compass. It kept his crown from becoming his cage. It reminded him that the throne was borrowed, and that power without humility becomes poison. In his final years, Solomon looked back at palaces filled with treasure, but what truly mattered wasn't the gold. It was the awareness that every coin shines because it reflects light from above. That's the lesson billionaires rediscover when they read ancient texts each morning. They don't just look for inspiration, they look for alignment. They remember that wealth is stewardship, not ownership. Because no matter how vast your fortune, you can't take it where wisdom doesn't dwell. The wisest souls know prosperity without purpose becomes emptiness disguised. And reverence, that quiet respect for the divine order, is what turns abundance into legacy. It's what transforms noise into harmony and possessions into. When Solomon built the temple, he didn't fill it with gold first. He filled it with silence, because only silence can hold glory. He understood that reverence is not religion, it's awareness. It's knowing that your power has a source, and that source demands gratitude. That's why the richest lives aren't the loudest ones, but the ones that whisper eternity through everything they build. The final law of wealth is not to own more, but to belong to something greater. When you walk with reverence, you stop chasing riches, and riches start chasing you. Because reverence is the invisible gravity of abundance. It pulls blessings toward those who respect the order that sustains them. So, as this journey ends, remember Solomon's ultimate truth. Wisdom makes you rich. Discipline keeps you rich. But reverence makes you worthy of the riches. And in that moment of humility, you no longer seek fortune. You become it.